Congress and China policy, attitudes, legislation, and policy impact. Thank you very much for this opportunity to offer one American specialist view of a complicated subject. I'll focus on several points reflecting my understanding of the broad drivers of the strong efforts of remarkable bipartisan congressional majorities since early 2018 to defend America against very serious, multifaceted challenges posed by the behavior of the Chinese party state. Three parts of what I will talk about. First, it will be explain Congress's remarkable influence over China policy in the past 4 years. Second, it will explain the challenges that China poses as seen by the Congress, and these are quite serious. And third, they will explain why Congress will continue its hard approach to China going forward. The record shows Congress, for better or worse, exerting extraordinary influence, more influence over U.S. China policy than in any other period in American history. The waves of anti-China legislation we see today have been developing almost 4 years. The remarkable negative shift in American policy against Chinese government behavior now dominates U.S. policy in the Indo-Pacific region, in competition for leadership in high technology industries, and a range of other key areas. It is a high stakes competition, determining which country will be the world's economic, military, and political leader. The congressional attitudes and legislation reflect keen urgency and underline the reality that this hardening American government approach with China will continue. American domestic politics drove the sharply negative turn against Chinese policies and actions. China's ever-growing challenges to a wide range of American interests eventually prompted a shift in China policy among leaders in Washington that emerged in public view with the Trump administration's national security strategy in December of 2017. But remember, the shift emerged erratically, with sometimes serious differences and discord within the administration. And President Trump vacillated unpredictably between tariffs and trade war and friendship with China's leader. However, bipartisan majorities in Congress proved much steadier in establishing, as a matter of law, a whole-of-government effort countering China's challenges, supported by a variety of other congressional legislation. President Trump and the administration moderated, as you may remember, to some degree in public pressure on China during the year-long 2019 trade negotiations. U.S. public opinion at this time and Democratic presidential candidates led by Joseph Biden were not supportive of a tough approach to China at this time. But bipartisan majorities in Congress sustained efforts supporting the whole-of-government pushback against China's actions. And then a turning point came with strong and broad American disapproval of China's government behavior as the COVID-19 pandemic hit the United States during the 2020 presidential election campaign, and Trump and Biden both remained very tough on China at that time. What are these China challenges that Congress is objecting to, putting so much pressure on? And I think what we find is that though congressional legislation and other actions usually dealt with only parts of the challenges posed by China, overall, these challenges can be grouped in three categories. First is the challenge posed by the over 3 decades of rapid development of Chinese modern military power, tipping the balance in the Indo-Pacific region, supporting Chinese territorial expansionism, and undermining U.S. alliances and partnerships in seeking dominance in the region. Second is the challenge seen by Congress posed by China's similarly long-standing efforts using state-directed development policies to plunder foreign intellectual property rights and undermine international competitors, having increasingly profound negative impacts on the United States and Western interests. Beijing does so with hidden and overt state-directed economic coercion, egregious government subsidies, import protection, and export promotion, using highly protected and state-supported products to weaken and often destroy foreign competition in key industries. In this way, it recently seeks dominance in major world high-technology industries and related military power to displace the United States and secure China's primacy in Asia and world leadership. And third is the challenge of China to global governance. More than any other power, Beijing leverages economic dependence, influence operations, including elite capture, and control of important infrastructure to compel deference to China's preferences. In the Indo-Pacific region, these practices are backed by intimidating Chinese military power. China's preferences include legitimating the above-mentioned predatory economic practices and territorial expansionism, opposition to efforts promoting accountable governance, human rights, and democracy, opposition to U.S. alliances seen impeding China's rise, and support for the forceful foreign advances of Vladimir Putin's Russia and the rule of other authoritarian and often corrupt world leaders unaccountable to their citizens. Since 2018, two challenges are often seen in Congress as particularly dangerous: existential threats to fundamental American national security and well-being. The first is the Chinese effort to undermine U.S. power and influence and dominate Asia. The second is the Chinese effort to seek dominance in the high technology industries of the future. Such dominance will make America subservient to Chinese economic power. And because such technology is essential to modern national security, it will make America subservient to Chinese military power. Seeking to avoid Chinese dominance appears to be a strong overall driver of the efforts of bipartisan majorities in Congress to defend America against China's challenges. So what's the outlook of this situation? Well, on the one hand, we have elements of continuity. The Biden administration's tough approach to China is now well established in key areas, including the Indo-Pacific and high technology competition. The bipartisan congressional legislation countering China prepared over the past year will add greater U.S. resolve to counter China's challenges. President Xi Jinping shows no sign, no letup in major challenges posing to America. But on the other hand, you have countercurrents, and these include U.S. businesses, universities, and other organizations closely engaged with China, along with prominent China specialists who have argued for greater moderation in dealing with China. They aver that the threat of Chinese challenges seen by U.S. policymakers is exaggerated, and U.S. policies should deal with China's challenges through nuanced approaches featuring dialogue and reassurance. It's against this background that the Biden government faces continuing problems in coming up with an effective strategy toward China that takes into account business and other pro-China interests in the United States and those interests among U.S. allies and partners as well. And other uncertainties come from the fact that the Republicans had a resurgence in the November elections, and that inflation, not seen in 40 years, is now linked to administration spending plans. All of these things place the Biden government under greater political pressure to pay more attention to domestic issues, possibly reducing the attention devoted to China issues. Meanwhile, the specter of return of Donald Trump to the White House in 2024 election suggests to U.S. allies and partners, at least, that the systematic, measured Biden policies in seeking cooperation with allies and partners to deal with China's challenges may not last. Congress is more consistent in this erratic pattern that we're seeing. The pending legislation targeting China shows Congress will continue strong efforts to counter China's challenges. More often than not, the legislation does not propose a sophisticated strategy. The focus today remains, as it has, on taking actions to defend America from particular challenges. For now, this overall bipartisan congressional push represents the main reason that I, and I think others, forecast continued U.S. hardening against China. For 4 years, congressional attitudes and actions have served as ballast, steadying the ship of state as it sails forward to defend America from what is seen as a Chinese onslaught. This trend will endure. Thank you for your attention.